Welcome to the Daily History Chronicle. Each day, we travel back to discover a pivotal moment that changed the world. These aren't just dates and facts. They're stories of courage, conflict, innovation, and consequence that still echo through our lives today. Are you ready to explore? Let's see what happened on this day in history.
March 7th, 1936. Early morning. German troops crossed the bridges into the Rhineland, the demilitarized zone along the Rhine River. They're violating the Treaty of Versailles. They're breaking international law. They're gambling everything on a bluff. Adolf Hitler is in the Reich Chancellery in Berlin, waiting. His generals oppose this operation. Too risky. France could crush them. The German army has only 22,000 lightly armed troops entering the Rhineland. France has 250,000 soldiers within striking distance. Hitler has given his commanders explicit orders. If France resists, retreat immediately. Don't fight, just pull back and claim it was a mistake. It's a complete bluff. In Paris, the French government debates what to do. They have the military power to stop this easily, but they're paralyzed by internal politics, economic crisis, and unwillingness to act without British support. In London, the British government shrugs. Hitler is just moving troops into his own territory, they say. Why should we care? It's not worth risking war over this. France does nothing. Britain does nothing. The League of Nations issues a condemnation and does nothing. Hitler's bluff succeeds completely. And with that success, World War II becomes inevitable. Not in 1939 when Poland was invaded. Here, March 7th, 1936, the moment when the Western democracies proved they wouldn't stop aggression. The moment Hitler learned he could get away with anything. This is the Daily History Chronicle, where we explore the moments that shaped our world and discover why they still matter today. I'm Richard Backus, publisher of University Teaching Edition, and every day I get to share a piece of history that I think you'll find as fascinating as I do. Let's look at the facts. What I find interesting about this moment is that March 7th, 1936, is the day when appeasement, the policy of giving into aggression to preserve peace, began in earnest. And it's the day when that policy guaranteed the very war it was trying to prevent. France and Britain wanted to avoid war. They'd lost millions in World War I just 18 years earlier. The trauma was still fresh. The economies were still recovering. Another war seemed unthinkable. So they did nothing when Hitler remilitarized the Rhineland. And that decision, made with the best intentions to preserve peace, made World War II inevitable. Understanding what happened requires holding both truths simultaneously. The Western democracies genuinely wanted peace, and their pursuit of peace through appeasement guaranteed war. Let me build the clock for you on how we got here. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, ended World War I. Among its many provisions, it demilitarized the Rhineland, the region of Germany along the Rhine River, bordering France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. No German troops allowed, no fortifications, no military installations. The logic was strategic. Keep Germany's industrial heartland vulnerable. If Germany were to attack France again, French forces could quickly occupy the Rhineland and cripple German war production. It was insurance against future German aggression. Germany hated the treaty, called it a diktat, a dictated peace imposed by force, not negotiated fairly. The Rhineland Clause was seen as particularly humiliating. Imagine telling France they couldn't put troops in Normandy, or telling the United States they couldn't station military in California. When Hitler came to power in 1933, he began systematically violating Versailles, rearmament, conscription, building an air force. Each violation was technically grounds for military intervention. Each time, France and Britain took no action. By 1936, Hitler felt emboldened. But the Rhineland was different. This wasn't hidden rearmament. This was an open, blatant violation. Everyone would see it, and France had treaty obligations to respond. Picture this: Hitler's war room, late February 1936. Hitler informs his generals that he intends to remilitarize the Rhineland on March 7th. The generals are horrified. General Ludwig Beck, chief of the General Staff, argues strenuously against it. Germany isn't ready for war. The army is still rebuilding. If France responds militarily, Germany will lose. Beck estimates they'd be crushed within weeks. Hitler doesn't care. He's convinced France won't act. He's watched them do nothing before. He believes democracies are weak, paralyzed by internal divisions, unwilling to take risks. But he's not certain. He issues the order: if France mobilizes, retreat immediately. Presented as a navigation error or a local commander's mistake, do not engage. On March 7th, German troops crossed into the Rhineland. They're infantry battalions, lightly armed, no heavy weapons, no tanks, no artillery. This is a symbolic occupation, not a military operation. Hitler later admitted that if France had so much as mobilized their forces, he would have pulled back with our tails between our legs. But France doesn't mobilize. Here's where it gets complicated. France had every right to respond, every military advantage, every strategic reason to stop Hitler now rather than later. But France was in political chaos. The government was weak, divided, and on the verge of collapse. Elections were coming. No politician wanted to be responsible for starting a war right before voting. Economically, France was struggling. Still recovering from the Depression, military action would be expensive, unpopular, risky, and there was the trauma of World War I. France had lost 1.4 million men, an entire generation. The northwestern part of the country was still scarred from the trenches. The idea of another war was unbearable. French military leaders urged action. General Maurice Gamelin sought to march into the Rhineland and land and expel the Germans. It would have been easy. A few days of operations, minimal casualties, mission accomplished. But the politicians wouldn't authorize it, not without British support. And Britain wasn't interested. Think about the position Britain was in. They'd also lost nearly 1 million men in World War I. The empire was overstretched. Economic troubles, growing independence movements in India, troubles in the Middle East. Many British politicians believed Versailles had been too harsh on Germany. The guilt clause that blamed Germany entirely for World War I. The reparations crippled the German economy. The territorial losses. When Hitler sent troops into the Rhineland, the British government's reaction was essentially, so what? They're German troops in German territory. It's not ideal that he violated the treaty, but is it really worth going to war over this? Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden tried to organize a strong response through the League of Nations. The League condemned Germany's action, issued a resolution, talked about sanctions. However, no military action was taken, no real consequences, just words. Hitler couldn't believe his luck. He later described March 7, 1936, as the most nerve-wracking 48 hours of his life. He'd gambled everything on Western inaction. When it paid off, he learned the most dangerous lesson possible. He could get away with aggression. Within months, Hitler began fortifying the Rhineland, building the Siegfried Line, massive defensive fortifications along the French border. The strategic vulnerability that Versailles had created was eliminated. If France wanted to stop Hitler now, it would have to break through prepared defenses. Much harder, much bloodier. And Hitler's timetable accelerated. In 1938, he annexed Austria, the Anschluss. Britain and France protested but took no action. In September 1938, he demanded the Sudetenland, the German-speaking part of Czechoslovakia. Britain and France forced Czechoslovakia to cede it. The Munich Agreement, peace in our time, declared British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain. In March 1939, Hitler took the rest of Czechoslovakia. Britain and France protested but took no action. In September 1939, Hitler invaded Poland. Finally, Britain and France declared war. But by then, Hitler had spent 3 years building up his military, fortifying his borders, and expanding German territory. The war that might have been avoided in 1936 with minimal effort now required 6 years and tens of millions of lives to resolve. The French and British leaders who chose appeasement weren't stupid. They weren't cowards. They were traumatized by World War I and desperate to avoid repeating it. They genuinely believed, that negotiation and compromise could preserve peace. They were wrong, catastrophically wrong, but their intentions were understandable. The tragedy is that their desire for peace made war inevitable. By showing Hitler he could violate treaties without consequences, they emboldened him. Each successful aggression led to the next. The pattern was clear, but they couldn't see it, or couldn't accept it until it was too late. We're still living with the lessons of March 7, 1936. Every debate about confronting aggression versus seeking diplomatic solutions echoes this moment. When Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, the debate was respond militarily and risk war, or impose sanctions and hope diplomacy works. When China expands in the South China Sea, the same question, confront now or seek a peaceful resolution. The lesson of 1936 seems clear. Appeasement doesn't work with aggressive autocrats. You have to draw lines and enforce them. Weakness invites further aggression. But there's another truth too. Not every situation is 1936. Not every leader is Hitler. Sometimes negotiation does work. Sometimes confrontation escalates unnecessarily. The challenge is knowing which situation you're in. That's what makes March 7, 1936 so important to understand. It's not just a cautionary tale about appeasement. It's a reminder that peacekeepers can cause war. Good intentions can lead to catastrophic outcomes. That the cost of action must be weighed against the cost of inaction. And sometimes inaction costs more. Winston Churchill, who was not yet Prime Minister in 1936 but was warning loudly about Hitler, later wrote, "There was never a war in all history easier to prevent by timely action than the one which has just desolated such great areas of the globe." He was right. A French mobilization in March 1936 would have stopped Hitler cold. The German military would likely have overthrown him. World War II would never have happened. But Churchill also understood the French and British dilemma. They weren't choosing between war and peace. They thought they were choosing between probable war, if they acted, and possible peace, if they negotiated. They were wrong about the odds, but the calculation was rational. The problem was that their framework was flawed. They were so focused on avoiding the last war that they couldn't see the next one coming. They thought Hitler could be managed, reasoned with, satisfied. They were projecting their own desire for peace onto a leader who wanted conquest. So what do we make of March 7, 1936? Hitler remilitarized the Rhineland in direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles. France had the military power to stop him easily. Britain could have supported French action. The League of Nations could have imposed serious consequences. None of that happened. Because the Western democracies wanted peace. They'd seen the horrors of World War I and were determined to avoid repeating them. Their desire for peace was genuine, understandable, and even admirable, and it guaranteed World War II. Both things are true. The way I see this, March 7th, 1936, teaches us that good intentions aren't enough, that wanting peace doesn't create peace, that sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to demonstrate a willingness to fight for it. It also teaches us that decisions have consequences we can't always foresee. French and British leaders in 1936 couldn't know with certainty that stopping Hitler in the Rhineland would prevent World War II. They were making their best judgment with incomplete information, but they were wrong, and their error cost 50 million lives. That's the burden of leadership in dangerous times. You have to make choices with imperfect knowledge. You have to balance competing risks, and sometimes, as with appeasement in 1936, the safe choice turns out to be the most dangerous one. The Western democracies eventually learned this lesson. After World War II, they built NATO precisely to avoid repeating the mistakes of appeasement. The alliance states that it will collectively resist aggression. We will make clear lines and defend them. We won't wait until it's too late. That structure kept the peace in Europe for 75 years, born from the failure of March 7th, 1936. I'm Richard Backus, and this is the Daily History Chronicle. Tomorrow, we'll explore another moment that shaped our world. Until then, ask yourself, when is compromise wise and when is it appeasement? How do we distinguish between preserving peace and enabling aggression? What's the cost of action versus the cost of inaction? Because that's what March 7th, 1936 teaches us, not just about Hitler's gamble, but about how the pursuit of peace can guarantee war when facing those who don't share that goal. Thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this episode, then please subscribe. If you really enjoyed it, then please tell a friend. I hope you will join me again tomorrow for more of our shared history.